Hello, fellow Movie Crusaders, and welcome to today's latest episode as we're going to be reviewing the Sony Marvel film Morbius. Now, for me, Morbius is one of these movies that has been, should have been released, I think, about 2-3 years ago, but kept, obviously, because of the pandemic and reshoots and everything like that, so we just kept getting pushed back further and further and further. It should have came out in January of this year, but it got pushed back to April 1st. Which, for anyone who knows April Fool's Day, that should have been a good indicator of what this movie was going to be like. Morbius is another one of Sony's attempts of trying to make a Spider-Verse outside of the MCU, or their version of trying to do a Sinister Six, which they started to tease in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which now with Venom being a success and, Spider-Man No Way Home kind of bringing back the older Spider-Man, this is starting to become more of an opinion or an option where they might start to bring back maybe Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man or something into these kinds of films. So with Morbius, we got Jared Leto back in another comic book role, since the his version of the Joker is pretty much, not going to happen anymore. And he's playing the character Morbius. And the main plot for Morbius is biochemist Michael Morbius tries to cure himself of a rare blood disease, but inadvertently infects himself with a form of vampirism instead. Normally, he's a Spider-Man villain in the comics, but in this movie, much like Venom, he's kind of more of the hero in this film, or more of an anti-hero, but in this movie, he's more of an actual hero in the film. Jared Leto, like I say, he plays Michael Morbius. I'm not a big Jared Leto fan. I'm going to come out right out and say that. This is definitely not a movie that I have been remotely excited to see. I went in with the lowest of low expectations for this film. The trailers have done nothing for me. The tease of Spider-Man stuff in this film with Michael Keaton and some Spider-Man photos and stuff like that has not really interjected much for me to want to see this film. And Jared Leto is another reason why I was not excited to see this movie. But Jared Leto is not the problem with this film. Most of the cast is not the problem with this film. If you guys haven't heard me already, this is not a good movie. This is one of the worst movies of the year, in my opinion. In terms of a film like this kind of brought back flashbacks to BVS, Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, where the theatrical cut felt kind of all over the place. The plot was everywhere. Nothing made a whole lot of sense. And now it's because there was so much plot and story that was left on the cutting room floor that they had to release a director's cut with about like 30 to 40 minutes of extra story. And when you went back and you watched that director's cut, everything kind of made sense. It felt like a fluid story. And it still wasn't necessarily a good movie, but it was definitely a way better film than we saw in theaters. Morbius, to me, feels like that kind of film. This feels like a hatchet job from Sony. I felt like they kind of went out of their way to make this a bad film because they either A, don't want to continue with the Morbius franchise, or B, really just have something out for Jared Leto. Because this is now the second film of Jared Leto's, the other one being Suicide Squad, where apparently there's a better film on the cutting room floor, but got hatcheted up by the studio before it got released in theaters. With Morbius, there is probably about a good 20 to 30 minutes of actual plot development and story characters that is left out of this film. The editing of this film is atrocious. There are moments where characters are doing certain things and then it's just dropped, or characters' motives have changed throughout the film, and you just can tell that there is a good chunk of this movie that has been removed from the film overall. Jared Leto's Michael Morbius, like I said, nothing's wrong with Jared Leto's performance in the role, but there's just his character himself, there's no life in the role. His character seems to just be kind of okay with his transformation into this kind of vampiric features and powers. His power set's never really fully explained. It's just kind of like, oh, well, that's what it is now. Cool, I've got this. And there's never that moment where he's ever worried or shocked by what's happening to him. He's just super chill and just kind of okay with it, which not really a good character development for the story. He basically just goes from this guy who's got this rare blood disease, who's really sickly thin and can't walk on his own, to all of a sudden ripped and in great shape, and all of a sudden wants blood and can basically kind of teleport in a way, almost like Nightcrawler through like a misty sonar kind of thing. Is he shocked by it? Not really. And that's kind of his story. His love interest, Martine Bancroft, played by Adria Jonah. I probably said that wrong. I apologize. You got a little bit of kind of banter from them in the beginning, and then she's abandoned from the script for about a good hour, and then brought back in for the third act, and we're supposed to care about her character. They give us no real inklings of a good love interest story between those two, but we're supposed to believe in it or feel in it. Jared Harris plays Dr. Emil Nicholas, who's someone from Morbius' past and who's a dear friend. It feels like there's a lot of his story that was probably left on the cutting room floor. Tyrese Gibson and Al Madrigal, who they play the agents that are trying to hunt down Morbius through the film. Those are two characters that don't seem to have much plot. Tyrese Gibson is one of the very, very lively, colorful actors in Hollywood. You've seen him in the Fast and Furious movies. You've seen him in Transformers. He's very loud and very lively in all his roles. And in this movie, I felt like he was given Adderall through this film. He basically just walks into a room, stoic look on his face, delivers one line, and that's it. And Al Madrigal's is basically trying to be comic relief, but none of his jokes are funny or remotely land. And these are just two characters that just keep popping up to eat some time on the runtime and then move on. They really serve no thorough purpose in this film. Once again, their whole film or their whole story could have been on the cutting room floor as well. The only performance in this movie that seems to know the movie that they're in and kind of runs and takes it as it's going is Matt Smith as Milo, who's basically Michael Morbius's best friend, and who ends up becoming the titular villain role of this film. And once again, there are certain parts of this story integral to this Milo character that is removed from this film, that we're just supposed to kind of just go along with it. Why is the Milo character like this? Why is the Milo character have means to do certain things like this? We don't know. They weren't given the character story for it. The action sequence in this movie is very clunky. The CGI is very early 2000s, 90s, very CGI. None of it looks good. It looks very video game-like. They like to do a lot of freeze, like almost like slow-mo freeze down time, kind of like in The Matrix. None of it really looks that great. The dialogue is kind of blocky. The storyline is, like I said, relatively missing. And outside of Matt Smith, none of the performances are really worthwhile or anything really fun to watch. It's a comic book movie that feels like a comic book movie that from the early 2000s or 90s, when comic book movies weren't considered good. There's probably a good movie here somewhere, but it is not in the theatrical cut of Morbius. Could they release a Morbius cut or a director's cut of Morbius down the road that might actually make this movie make sense? Sure. Will I check it out? Maybe, if people are saying that it's actually good. But the problem is that Morbius is a film that is not a film. It is a cookie cutter stuff thrown together and released out into the world with an incoherent plot, very bad character development, and really a piss-poor job of introducing the world to a character of Morbius, which is actually a relatively beloved character in the Spider-Man villainverse, and is introduced with a kind of lackluster performance from Jared Leto, with a lackluster script, poorly directed, and just an overall bad comic book movie. Also, the score is a complete ripoff of Batman Begins, or even The Dark Knight from Hans Zimmer's score. There was many times throughout this movie where I was hearing the score and I kept going, this reminds me of something, and I can't put my finger on it. Luckily, one of my other reviewers that I follow pointed out that it was Batman Begins, and as soon as he said that, it immediately went off in my head. The movie abruptly ends when it felt like there was probably another 5-10 minutes of movie left to kind of go, and it just ends abruptly, and it has hands down two of the worst, and I say worst post-credit scenes I've ever seen. Rage-inducing, confusion, utter stupidity. Those were the things that ran through my head when I watched these post-credit scenes. There was no reason for them. You can literally, if you're going to go see this movie, which I strongly urge you not to, just leave as soon as the credits hit Morbius. Don't check out these post-credit scenes. Just read about them. They're that bad. They're that shoehorned in. We know they're the certain character, and I already mentioned Michael Keaton's character, Adrian Toomes from the MCU Spider-Man world. He is in the trailers for this film. He is a part of the post-credit scenes. It feels like these scenes were shot weeks ago because of what happened in Spider-Man No Way Home. There feels no congruent plot from the post-credit scenes to the actual film itself. Everything about this movie is bad. It really, really is bad. Like I said, the only thing that is remotely redeeming is Matt Smith's performance, because he's hamming it up, because he knows the movie that he's in. And even then, poor Matt Smith, every time he tries to emote any kind of emotion or performance of any kind in this film, they throw a CGI face on him, a vampiric CGI face, and they never ever let Matt Smith actually ever get to give a good facial acting throughout this film, if that makes any sense at all. And it was very frustrating, because every 5 seconds they were just morphing Matt Smith's face throughout this role. It's bad. Morbius is really, really, really bad. I don't recommend checking this out. If you guys want to, more power to you, but there is nothing redeeming of this film except for maybe, like I said, if you're really a big Doctor Who fan and you want to see Matt Smith in a villain role, check it out. Matt Smith needs to do better jobs picking his film roles. I love the guy, and he's got the Game of Thrones spinoff coming out here in the summer, and I hope that really does well, and Matt Smith can kind of get better movie roles, because his movie roles so far have been abysmal. He's just making bad choices. Jared Leto, I hope this is the last we see of Jared Leto in comic book films. I hope we do not get any future Morbius films here in the near future. It makes Venom, who are two Venom movies I absolutely do not like, it makes the Venom movies look like a masterclass in filming compared to Morbius here. If I'm going to give Morbius a score, I'm going to give it a 30. I know that, and even that sounds a little high for me, and a lot of that is for the Matt Smith performance. Like I said, Adriana Arjona, she's not bad in the film. It's just her and Jared Harris, they're both fine in the film. It just feels like a good chunk of their story was removed for some weird reason. If this movie had gotten that 20-30 minutes back of actual plot story, this movie might have actually been a passable comic book film overall. But this just feels like a movie that was a hatchet job to begin with. It's not a complete film, nor should you go pay for a complete film, because you're not going to get one out of this. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. If you guys did, go ahead and hit that like, share, and subscribe button to the channel so you guys stay up to date with all the latest videos pop up on the Movie Crusaders. And of course, I'm going to follow us on all the social media outlets you see below. Coming up next, we have a review for the Netflix film The Bubble. Also, Brian Michaels and myself will be back this upcoming week with another actor, actress, director showcase, where we'll be talking about Nicolas Cage, Michael Bay, and Charlize Theron. Also, last week we shot our Oscar show, which if you guys want to go back and see how we predicted the Oscars would go, obviously we didn't talk about certain things that happened on the Oscars. Feel free to check that out. We got reviews for Ambulance and Sonic the Hedgehog 2 coming out next week, as well as some more shows coming down for the month, such as Movie Crusaders Chat About, where we'll be talking about reboots, remakes, and original films, and also cult movies. And then we'll also be going over our summer movie previews. So feel free to check all those videos. Until next time, in case I don't see you, good morning, good afternoon, and good night, Movie Crusaders.
You're still here. It's over. Go home.